Of all the great questions that have haunted humanity, one stands above the rest. What happens after we die? Most ancient cultures met this question with fear or resignation. But one civilization dared to challenge the finality of death itself. They did not just hope for an afterlife, they engineered it. This is the story of how the ancient Egyptians, through a combination of profound faith and radical science, built a bridge to eternity. Our story begins on the banks of the Nile, a river that gave life and, through its predictable cycles of flood and harvest, taught a lesson of rebirth. The Egyptians believed a human being was a composite entity. There was the Khat, the physical body. There was the Ka, a life force or spiritual double that lived on in the tomb and required sustenance. And there was the Ba, a soul with a human head and the body of a bird, which could travel between the world of the living and the dead. For a person to achieve a glorious afterlife as an ark, a transfigured spirit, all these parts had to be preserved and reunited. But they faced a terrifying problem. The body, the anchor for the soul on earth, was destined to decay. To the Egyptian mind, if the body was lost, the soul would be lost with it, a second and final death. Their solution was one of the most audacious projects in human history: mummification. It didn't begin as a science. The earliest Egyptians discovered that bodies buried in the hot, dry desert sands were naturally preserved. But as burial customs became more sophisticated, with the elite demanding elaborate tombs called mastabas, the bodies were no longer in contact with the sand. They began to rot. A new, artificial method was needed. By the time of the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BCE, the process had become a sacred and intricate science, a 70-day ritual performed by specialized priests. The chief embalmer, wearing the mask of Anubis, the jackal god of mummification, would oversee the work. The body was taken to the Ibu, the place of purification, where it was washed. Then, in the Wabbit, or House of Beauty, the real work began. A slit was cut in the abdomen, and the internal organs, the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines, were removed, as they were the first to decompose. The brain, which they considered unimportant stuffing, was unceremoniously extracted through the nose with long hooks. The only major organ left in place was the heart. To the Egyptians, the heart was the seat of intelligence, memory, and conscience, and it would be needed for the final judgment. The removed organs were preserved separately and placed in 4 canopic jars, each protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus. The hollowed body was then packed and covered with natron, a natural salt harvested from the dry riverbeds. For 40 days, the natron drew out every last drop of moisture, leaving the tissues desiccated but intact. This was not superstition, it was applied chemistry. Once dried, the body was cleaned, anointed with oils, and meticulously wrapped in hundreds of yards of fine linen. Magical amulets, like the scarab beetle for rebirth, were tucked within the layers, and priests recited spells to protect the deceased on their journey. The process was complete, but the journey was only just beginning. Before the tomb was sealed, the opening of the mouth ceremony was performed. Priests would touch the mummy's mouth, eyes, and ears with ritual instruments, magically reawakening the senses so the deceased could eat, see, and hear in the afterlife. The tomb itself was a house for eternity, and its walls were a roadmap. They were covered in spells from texts like the Pyramid texts and, later, the Book of the Dead. These were cheat sheets for the soul, guiding it through the perilous underworld, the Duat. The soul had to face terrifying demons, answer riddles from divine gatekeepers, and finally, face the ultimate trial, the weighing of the heart. In the Hall of Two Truths, the deceased's heart was placed on a scale, weighed against the single feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was heavy with sin, it would outweigh the feather and be devoured by the monstrous Amit, a hybrid of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, condemning the soul to utter oblivion. But if the heart was light, the soul was declared true of voice and ushered into the presence of Osiris, the god of the dead, to live forever in the field of reeds, a perfect, eternal reflection of Egypt. This entire colossal effort, from the science of embalming to the construction of the pyramids, themselves massive resurrection machines designed to launch the pharaoh's soul to the stars, was driven by a single, powerful idea. By refusing to accept the finality of death, the ancient Egyptians created a legacy that achieved a form of immortality they could never have imagined, leaving a story of science, faith, and architecture that continues to awe the world.